It's happening sometime in the early morning hours Saturday. If it happens earlier, it is going to cut just along the eastern shore of Florida. Think Hurricane Matthew, a similar scenario where a 20-mile deviation one way or the other is going to make a very big difference. If it turns a little bit later, it's going to slam right into Florida. So Florida certainly needs to be doing everything watching this right now. That said, if it skips just to the east of this, it's going to stay over water and probably go in towards Georgia or South Carolina. So we're in a lot of talk about Florida right now, guys. If you're in Georgia, South Carolina, you need to be keeping an eye on this as well, because it is very possible that the storm just stays offshore and goes in towards that area. We cannot tell at this point. We won't know probably for about another day and a half exactly when we expect to see that turn happen, guys.
Yeah, we do know that it is big and it is dangerous right now, though. Rick Ruckman, live. Thank you.
Deteriorate Anderson in Puerto Rico and San Juan. They're getting gusts over 60 right now, and the rain's really going to start to pick up. Yesterday, we told you there's only one other hurricane in recorded history in the Atlantic that was stronger. That was Allen in 1980. But Irma surpassed Allen in one dangerous category. This has been churning for over 31 straight hours with winds above 180 miles per hour. That is just staggering, and it continues its strength. We saw the large ice swallow up Barbuda. We heard from the foreign minister of France saying the 4 largest structures in St. Martin have been destroyed, along with most of the other buildings. We haven't heard from Anguilla. Then in the British Virgin Islands, and the radar now showing a well-defined eye offshore, not expected to make landfall, not for Puerto Rico or Dominican Republic or for Haiti. But the outer bands are starting to lash this and will for a couple more hours. The National Hurricane Center's track shows it moving through the Turks and Caicos in between Cuba. Warnings are in effect there. We could see 15, 20-foot storm surges in the Turks and Caicos and Southeast Bahama Islands. Already evacuations taking place there. Not much of a change from this morning to this evening's track, but there was a change from last night. Shifting it eastward toward Miami about 60 to 70 miles per off to the east. There is still a cone of uncertainty here, Alan, so each day is important as we watch these models unfold each and every day this week.
So just to specify that on Miami, it is now shifted which direction? East?
East, about 60 to 70 miles, yeah.
All right, so Ed, I know you've spent decades studying forecasting hurricanes from a historical perspective. How rare is this storm, and what do you make of these models? How accurate are they?
At this point, we have quite a bit of confidence in the next 3.5 days or so in terms of the track. As you saw, we're expecting the hurricane to pass just north of the islands, and then when it gets about to the Florida Peninsula,
so that means it's in Miami right now.
What we don't know is whether the turn's going to occur right over the peninsula, just to the east, or just to the west. That makes a huge difference. If the hurricane turns and comes over South Florida, as is forecast now, this will be the most significant impact that we've had in Florida, in fact, in the U.S. since Hurricane Andrew. So this would be a once-in-a-generation type of hurricane if it comes ashore at Category 4 to 5.
So that's the middle track, or is that the track on the far west?
Right now, the forecast track is for the hurricane center to come up very close to the east coast, but we're talking about 4 to 5 days from now, and the average error is large enough to cover the entire peninsula here from west to east. So if it comes ashore, we will have the worst of the conditions. If it turns offshore, even past, let's say, 50 miles offshore, we'll still have hurricane force winds in South Florida because the size of the storm is large enough to bring hurricane force winds out to that extent.
Do you know, and this may be a dumb question, when we will know which of those options it may be taking with confidence?
We'll probably know in about 24 to 36 hours. At this point, what we know is a little more clearly is that the track will turn near the peninsula. As of yesterday, there was still some possibility that it would make it into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. That's much less likely right now. Now we're focused more on the area from east to the west part of the Florida Peninsula.
And Tom, is it possible for it to go further up the East Coast?
Yeah, I mean, we can look at an ensemble. This is about 21 models that make up the U.S., the GFS model. And we're still wondering, first, if it's going to interact with Cuba, because that could downgrade it somewhat and squeeze out a lot of water, unfortunately, for Cuba. But if it heads in this direction and then further to the north, I mean, we could be looking at a landfall up in the Carolinas if it stays just off the coast as well. And Anderson, this is a lot like Matthew last year. I mean, this is devastated at Category 5 in Haiti, taking hundreds of lives, and then plowing into Cuba. But if you recall, when it made its way through the Bahamas and we had kind of an eye wall replacement cycle, reorganizing itself near Freeport, it stayed right along the coast. I mean, we had significant damage on A1A, buildings all the way up and down the coast.
I'm showing you the news, Grandma.
Flooding that we had up in the Carolinas where we lost
right
dozens
now.
of people
This is
with the
right
flooding
now.
in parts of Georgia, South, and North Carolina. So even if it stays off the coast, there's going to be damage. The difference is off coast is catastrophic damage. And if it stays off the coast, it'll be minimal or moderate damage. But if it just slides a little bit, I mean, we're talking catastrophic damage on land for the entire peninsula. The winds, the tropical storm force winds are so wide, it would swallow the entire Florida peninsula as it makes its way northward.
Ed, I mean, just how buildings in a city like Miami, if it was that track that takes it right over land, how strong are they? I mean, are they built to prepare for a Cat 5?
After Hurricane Andrew, Florida upgraded their building codes, and the building codes are the strongest in the nation here. Still, a Category 5 hurricane is going to cause devastating damage. The buildings may well be strong enough for people to survive now, which is good, but there will be tremendous damage if the center and the eye wall just around it come across the land.
Tom, say.
This is what Irma looked and also sounded like as it tore like a freight train through St. Martin. And this is what is barreling right now toward the U.S. mainland. And well,
very strong winds, but the core of those Category 5 winds are right there around the center of the eye, and I think the worst of that is going to stay just to the north of Puerto Rico, which would be really good news. Now, this is a look at the future radar. This is a depiction of what we think the radar will look like. I will tell you, Turks and Caicos is going to get hammered. The Bahamas are going to get hammered from this throughout the day tomorrow and into the day on Friday. We know it'll continue off in towards this kind of western, a little bit northwesterly trek. We also are very confident that it's going to make a very sharp right turn. Where it makes that right turn is going to make all the difference on who gets the worst of the impacts.
Saturday.
Does it go towards the western shore of Florida? I think that's the least likely scenario. Somewhere here, maybe towards South Florida, that's a very likely scenario. And also a very possible scenario that it stays just offshore of Florida, maybe rakes the coastline. Think of what we saw last year with Hurricane Matthew that just hugged the coastline for a long time and eventually made landfall somewhere up here, or makes landfall somewhere around the South Carolina or Georgia coastline. So a lot of possibilities still with us because it's making this right-hand turn right where we have U.S. land. A 20 or 30 mile deviation one way or the other is going to have really big impacts. And we unfortunately just can't say that just yet at this point. Lots still to watch with this, and we'll continue to do that and keep everybody up to the latest. Neil?
You know, Tom, this is a monster of a hurricane plowing through the Caribbean right now. What's the latest on this?
You said it perfectly, Don. I mean, we're running out of adjectives and superlatives to describe it. When a meteorologist runs out of those, it's time to pack up and head out, because we have seen now 32 straight hours plus that the system has been churning with winds at 180 miles per hour or greater. I mean, we haven't had systems like this. This is definitely the strongest to ever impact the Leeward Islands. And last night, we were concerned about Barbuda. In fact, around 1 in the morning. In fact, barely habitable, as you mentioned, the Prime Minister said. St. Martin, the French foreign minister, said that the 4 tallest buildings on the island are completely destroyed, as well as most of the buildings, either completely or partially. We haven't heard from Anguilla yet. British Virgin Islands took a direct hit as well. If there's any good news I can find in the last couple of hours is we're not looking at a major landfall in the near future. So we got maybe another 24 hours without one, and it's pulling away from Puerto Rico. Good news, it's about 70 miles away now. It's been undergoing a kind of an eye wall replacement cycle, reorganizing itself. So again, as it starts to strengthen again,